Okay, welcome back everybody. Now we're going to move on to item 5, which is the Environmental Infrastructure Services Performance Report for Q3 and Q4 of 25-26 financial year. And we have Director Alan Wood with us this morning to introduce the report. Welcome, Alan.
Chair, thank you. Good morning. Good morning, committee. I'm very pleased to present, as you say, Chair, the latest performance update for my directorate for the Kincardine and Mearns area, covering quarters 3 and 4 of the last financial year. The information should be considered alongside the performance earlier in the year and indeed the same period for last year. In that vein, overall, the performance remains stable, with 7 out of 10 indicators are on target, 1 just off target, and 2 that are off target in the current reporting period. Still, this represents an improvement from earlier in the year, where 6 indicators were on target and the remaining 4 were off, indicating a strengthening position over the course of the year. In terms of the Council's overall priorities from a sustainable economy perspective, performance is broadly positive, with householder planning applications. They are performing well, with determination times improving now at 5.5 weeks, better than both earlier in the year and also within target. There is a however, and that's the non-householder applications. They've seen some deterioration with some longer determination times. And that's really due to a small number of older and also more complex cases coming through and being completed, and that impacts on the overall averages that we're reporting. But again, overall performance for all total local developments remain within target, which is encouraging. The second priority, the connected communities, street lighting faults completed within 7 days. That's still stubbornly below target, and I'm very aware I've been in front of you before with significant below target figures. I've got some further information and statistics I can share with you if required, but it's still stubbornly below, and that continues to reflect the number of this relatively small number of faults, but also the operational approach that we're adopting, which is around prioritization works, efficiency when teams are already in an area, alongside some of the earlier impacts, such as adverse weather conditions impacting on the ability for the teams to actually get out and do that work. So acutely aware of that one. And the third priority is living well locally. Housing performance remains strong. Tenant arrears and void rent loss continue to perform within target and compare favourably to both the overall Aberdeenshire position and indeed the national benchmarking position. Homelessness resolution times remain above target, but to note that the overall annual position has improved compared to the period last year, despite some short-term variation. And I'm very conscious, particularly in this indicator, that it's an indicator with statistics, and as you have often reminded me, people and families are behind this, so acutely aware of the context of the comment. Looking across the year and comparing to the same period last year, overall shows broad continuity with some improvement in key housing measures and planning performance, alongside ongoing pressure still within some specific areas, homelessness and street lighting, to repeat that. So, Chair, in summary, the position for Kincardine and Mearns is one of general stability with regard to performance, elements of signs of improvement, with strong delivery on planning and housing. So, Chair, very happy to take any questions or comments from yourself and members. Thank you.
For the report, Alan, and your introduction to it. I will take questions, and it's Councillor Carr, George.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Alan, as always, for your printed report. It was just on the streetlights. Obviously, that's an issue that's reflecting more and more in our inboxes. When a streetlight fails and we are maybe not going to replace it, we just saw it off, does that mean it's no longer operational and it no longer counts in the figures? And just on the fact that we're sawing these off, could we not see them maybe being removed, because they just look very visible on the streets and they're becoming a bit of an eyesore? So 2 comments there. Thanks, Chair.
Chair, through you, if I may. Yes, to your first question with regard to including them in the statistics, and the complete removal, I think that brings with it perhaps further issues around the wiring and the connections and either the safety around that or the permanency of covering that up, and rather than when we've got the remainder of the column there, that we can still access any connections and wiring that's there for any future replacement of that street lighting column. I take your point about the unsightliness, and it's something that I'm acutely aware of, and I know you are as well. I think the fact that the overall resourcing position that I've got just now with regard to the street lighting estate just does not permit the same level of replacement as I've had in previous years. Now that's the position, so it's not a complaint, but it's been able to work within that. What I'm keen to do with the team is continue when we report back through Infrastructure Services Committee with our statement report, is to flag the condition of our streetlights and also a replacement period. And then ideally we get the funding to match that. And if we don't, then there is another plan B position, which is the removal if they are generally unstable. So not an ideal position, I know, in terms of the visibility, but equally I would say that's a position that we're working within just now, Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Chair.
Very much. Councillor Blackthorne.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks, Alan, for the report. Always good to see it and see how we're doing. My question is also on lighting, but on cabling faults. You'll be very aware that we have quite a lot of cabling faults that have been ongoing for a couple of years now, and so my question is around the prioritisation of fixing areas that have got cabling faults. I mean, obviously, I know that there's a budgetary consideration there, but there are people that have been without lighting in their streets potentially for 2-3 years now. So at what point does time start to come into the matrix for making decisions about priorities? Because even if someone lives in a cul-de-sac, if they haven't had those lights for 3 years, surely at some point that has to become a priority for us to get it fixed.
Thanks, Councillor Black, through you, Chair. Again, I take your point, and I think there's a key point there. Two key points. One is about the time period, which I accept, and one is about the available resources. Simply, we will be continuing to apply that prioritisation. It's going to be around an element of safety, the location, the road use, the frequency of road use, a number of factors in there, which I appreciate can sound very similar to a roads maintenance prioritisation. There is an additional element I would say around safety, which I know this committee has talked about before, depending on the location of the streetlight, and that is something that's taken into account. Time, it is a factor rather than the key deciding factor, but it is a factor. But we will go with prioritisation rather than time, without completely excluding time. I think one of the challenges that we're finding is that because of the size of the estate, there's over 47,000 streetlights that we've got, and we are seeing an ageing estate, ageing asset, that I think it's inevitable that we're going to see more of these situations occurring. And therefore, one of the ways that we're looking at this is, whilst the streetlights are a separate entity, there's also the roads estate, the broader estate, and is there funding that we can move between some of these assets? Now, to do that, you take it away from another one, and that's also a prioritisation. So it's difficult in terms of our allocation of funding. It's not difficult to recognise when there's an issue, as you quite rightly say. But we continue with our recruitment. We're still not at full complement with our electricians in terms of the cabling, but we continue with that. And if that is successful, that will allow me then to redeploy resources around Aberdeenshire, which might start to address, and I'll say might rather than promise. Councillor Black, thank you.
Thank you. Alan, we'll move to Councillor Allison.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alan. I'm going to move to the Living Well Locally and the homelessness figures that you spoke about as well. Obviously, it's good to see that the overall resolution in 25-26 in K&M was improving, but obviously we do notice as well the figures are creeping up this year as well. So it's important that we give attention to the creep this year rather than just accept what happened last year, which was obviously good news at that point. I think that's important. Our attention is on this. You made a comment when you presented about obviously knowing what's behind these figures, and I really appreciate you having done that. My question relates to it not just being about numbers of people, though, because each case will come with particular support needs required, and obviously different support needs required will take different time to do it. So is our focus on numbers here and our resolution time here acting against the support needs needed for people? And are we making sure, despite having these targets, we are also focusing on individual needs? And if things take longer to get that support put in place, can you please confirm that is happening? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Everson. Yes, I mean, for me, it's about the individual or about the family first, and I'm able to say that with confidence because I was getting an update from the team just recently with the performance indicators in mind, and the performance indicators are clearly important as it's one measure of how we're doing against the targets that we have set. As an example, we did notice a spike in the figures in Q2 of the last financial year, and we had a look at that, and we've now seen that spike has returned back to lower levels, really averaging out about 18 per quarter, and that compares to the spike of about 30 cases presented in Q2. And now, when we looked at that, we did think that some of the engagement that the team has had with the individuals involved was representing what we would call some good homelessness prevention work. And I know that can be a clunky term to use here because, again, it's people, but it does demonstrate that the teams are speaking to the individuals, and the individuals are demonstrating to the teams what their needs are and often what their circumstances are. And then we look at the provision of effective housing options and also the advice services that can wrap around that. Now, if that takes longer than an 87-day period, so be it. Clearly, that's still, almost pushing 3 months there. So we're mindful of the number of days in terms of the impact on the people, and we're also mindful of their circumstances and their needs. And then we report the statistics. So hopefully that's reassuring, Councillor.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Councillor Turner, Alan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, Alan. I guess a couple of questions. First one, obviously, we've got here is the K&M performance indicators. I'm just wondering, comparatively across your directorate, how is K&M versus the other areas? Would it be the same sort of numbers, same sort of percentage figures you're seeing elsewhere, or is there something we're particularly, let's say, not as good in, or something we're better in? That would be my first question. And my second one, maybe I should give the answer to the first bit, is on street lights. Okay,
happy to do that. I've had the unusual situation, I think it's twice now, going around the 6 area committees in this cycle where I've reported the 10 indicators all being green. And I did that. It was actually Buchan last Tuesday. I reported all being green. Now, that promoted no questions, and it enabled me to say, I don't often do that and say all 10 are green. Now, purely from a performance indicator perspective, that was really helpful, and that included street lights as well. So the 62.5% target on street lights has been met in Buchan, for example. As you will know, as I do, the areas are very, very different, whether it's geography, whether it's population, whether it's demographics, the areas are very different. I'm generally seeing the building warrant applications and PIs holding up very similar. Also generally seeing the totality of planning applications holding up across the 6 areas. There does tend to be some fluctuations between the domestic and non-domestic, but when you take the totality, they hold up. And actually, if I look at homelessness and voids as well, there's not a lot of difference. And sometimes, again, when I look at the 2 north areas in particular, they tend to have higher levels of void and homelessness, but are still close within their targets. So actually in this cycle, there's generally positivity, even if I'm saying 7 out of 10, but there are pockets. Street lights, generally tends to be one that's across most, clearly not all areas this time. So that's the general picture, Councillor Turner.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think the street lights. Okay. Yeah, it's not the first time that we've, shown, say, I'll put it less than the target. In fact, I'm trying to remember when we last achieved the target in K&M. I talked about my mind here. So what I always look at is what's driving the figures to be as low. You've talked about basically officers and number of. Also, we've talked about perhaps it's a type of fault, whether it be cabling or structural to do with the column. And I'm wondering, is there some sort of breakdown or a way of looking at this metric that could be different to what we've got? Even if it's the case they've achieved it in Banff and Buchan, but we failed to achieve it here. I'm just wondering if it's the type of faults we're getting are predominantly being driven by things that are not bulb replacements. Is there a way, maybe, I don't know if you've got additional information, it's trying to understand what's driving that metric to continually be below 62.5%.
Sure, Chair, through you. I've got some statistics. They're relatively familiar ones rather than the detail, but I think so. I'll cover them first. So I've reported through here before when I've said a figure of just over 6% compared to target. The figures for Q4 last financial year rise to 34% of target. So in one sense, a significant increasement, but still well short of the target. I'm just checking my stats here, going back to Q3, 24-25. So out of those 6 quarters, the target hasn't been met, which meets your point there, Councillor Turner. For me, the integrity of the street lighting column and then the ability to have a street light working at the top is obviously important. The obviously important bit can then be informed by what's the type of fault. So I don't have that information to hand, but it's a key bit of information to understand, because when we were replacing the filaments with the LEDs, we were noticing that the LEDs are significantly longer life. So the bulb itself has a greater integrity and lifespan. At the same time we're doing that, there will be an element of checking on the cabling to see if it's still valid, and it will be when we replace the light bulb. You're then into the lighting head, and you're then into the column. So there's a number of parts there. I will certainly take that back and ask the question, and if there is more information, I can provide that to committee, because it will be useful to me operationally, and I think to yourself as well, Councillor Turner.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I mean, I'm just conscious of a metric that it's perhaps, maybe it could be done differently. It's not for me for here, but it's for something that needs to be looked at, I think, in terms of review. Thank you.
Okay, just a couple of questions from me, Alan. So first of all, with regard to street lights, this is a stubborn number. It will perhaps remain a stubborn number over time. What I find frustrating is that our website continues to say that we have a 7-day target, and that there isn't the suppleness within our communications on the website to have some kind of messaging that says that, that makes clear it's target, and it might, we're off target in places, which can then ultimately be updated. And it's not to give us a get out of jail card in saying that. It's just to manage people's expectations appropriately. And one of the places that people go to know what to do when it comes to reporting a street light is, if not through Fix My Street, it is through our website. And they get a message that says, when they report it on Monday, it should be dealt with by the following Sunday, with nothing nuancing that, bearing in mind we know that we are off target, and down here we have been continually off target for a long period. So I guess I'm expressing a hope that we could perhaps deal with that there's a way to have engagement through our website that is more subtle, that, a message can go up and a message can be taken down when it's improved or it changes, but it's there to help us communicate, and the information there, it's not to walk away from a 7-day target. As long as it's there, that is the target. But I think we need to help people to know that they may find that there is a longer delay. So that's just a reflection, or you're welcome to come back on that if you like. My other question was relating to void rent loss, just to ask whether any of that relates to sort of invasive works on properties like internal wall insulation and so on.
Okay, Chair, thank you for that. With regard to the streetlight target, there was more than one key word you said there, but if I can pick up on engagement and the communication, whether it's through the website or other means, I think that's really important. And the example I would give you is in the last 2 quarters of the last financial year, we completed 16 streetlight replacements out of a target of 47. Whereas in the previous quarter, we did 32 out of 95. Now, both come out at a rough figure of 34%, but I would argue there's a very different performance there in terms of replacing 32. I accept there's a significant more that haven't been replaced, but in terms of statistics, it's a steady 34%, but we've actually achieved 16 in one quarter, 32 in another. And I think that's more telling as well. And of course, we can attach an address to that. The reason I say that is not to say, look, it's relatively good. It's not. It's 34% and it's not good. But there are more. There's more data there, and we can attach that as well. With regard to the target itself, there's a balance that I'm trying to strike between my words, not yours. If I increase the target from 7 to 12 days, am I masking some of the performance issues and now reporting on 12 days, and my figures might look better, and balancing that with trying to get realistic, meaningful and stretched targets. Now, I've just said to you over the last 6 quarters, I haven't met the target. So is that literally a stretch too far with that target? So I'm happy to take that comment and challenge away to see if that balance between, I don't want to mask performance by making my target easier or less stringent against that stretch target, which I still aspire to achieve. So I'm very happy to take that away and also look at the type of information that is presented regularly, because if I'm going to say I'll do it in 7 days and it's either 21 days or, as Councillor Black said, my words again, not at all, that's less than helpful information. So I take your point. So very happy to look at the individual elements that you raised there, Chair.
Thank you. So just coming back on that point, I guess if you have all green targets in Buchan, the target is achievable. And for some reason, we are in a different situation down here. So whether that's down to staffing or whatever it might be, whatever you can learn from that up in Buchan, it would be good to see that translated down here in terms of improvement. My key concern is not that we make our targets easier necessarily, but that we're transparent. We're sitting here today in committee, there's transparency here around these numbers, but not everybody's listening into this conversation. So it's about when I go onto the website, am I enabled to know what to expect? Because target in itself in this area is not what you can expect necessarily in terms of performance at the moment. So that was that point. I'll just bring you back to the voids question, void rent loss,
Yes.
and whether or not there's
certainly with regard to void rent loss.
Nature.
Sorry, Chair, I'm cutting across you. Any properties that are undertaking major work, such as the internal wall insulation, they are considered exempt from the performance indicators. They're not included in that.
That's very helpful to understand. Thank you. Councillor Burnett, Shirley.
Thank you. This is just a very general question, and forgive my ignorance if I should know. Do all the teams that work in each area cover just that area, or is everybody Shire wide? Are they fluid? And does that, if they are just one area, does that explain the difference in some of the figures, please?
Yes, no, it's really important question, because the predominance of my answer is yes. They tend to work in one location or across a set location. The however is I can, or my team can, redeploy to other locations as well, and it's something that we certainly have done and have looked at before. With regard to when there are particular issues and particular challenges around the roads network, for example. So the teams work out of depots and they've got their worksheets, and it tends to be in a location. When we start to redeploy and go further, the factor of time and geography comes into it. We know this, but it is possible to do, Councillor Burnett, yes.
Thank
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alan. I'm not seeing any further hands. So on that basis, I'll take us to the recommendations. The recommendation is to consider and comment on progress made in relation to environment and infrastructure services performance indicators relating to the Kincardine and Mearns area, which we have done. So we have discharged that. Thank you very much for attending this morning, Alan, and answering our questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Now, members, I've been asked if I could move item 8 up the agenda. This is the Business Services Area Committee Performance Indicator Report year-end progress for April 25 to March 26. This is due to a clash for Mr. Simpson. We would like to attend early if possible. So I've agreed to that. And Rob, if you're on the call, I would invite you to introduce your report.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members, and thank you for taking this report further up the agenda than was originally scheduled. So the report in front of you, there's 15 indicators within the report. 7 are showing as green, 1 is amber, and 7 are data only, so demand-led indicators within the report, mainly relating to financial performance. Performance across the board generally quite strong, most on track, most indicators on track, and pressures largely showing through that relate to external demand. So if we start with customer services, that is showing quite strong performance at this point. Call wait times are within target and have been for a substantial period of time now, so just below 5 minutes, with call abandonment still within target as well. That's despite us seeing an increased volume of calls coming through. So I think that shows relatively good performance. And I'll say that subsisted for a period of time as we moved resources across from previous service points and other areas into the contact centre. So that increasing demand is being managed within the contact centre, and we are continuing to look at other means and ways of dealing with some of those contacts. So digital improvements, for example, greater use of systems and improved service delivery. In terms of benefits processing, generally performing well. You'll see within the report, council tax reduction, new claims are within target. Changes also being processed quite quickly, and housing benefit processing is within target. So again, relatively strong performance there, despite an increasing complexity coming through in terms of universal credit changes. We've seen a mass migration to universal credit. That probably took us slightly by surprise. It came quicker than we thought it would and had originally been intended, but that's been managed well across the team. In terms of asset condition, it's strong locally, so we see high 90%, 90%, that's not a word, but 98% is showing of floor area and satisfactory condition across K&M. So that's above the Aberdeenshire average and above the Scottish average, so that's good. But the suitability of buildings is below the average at the moment. So there is work to do there. That ties into our rationalisation programme as we look at, do we keep these buildings, do we not? And that is work across services with colleagues within the property and facilities management team. So suitability of buildings, it is a test of whether they are suitable for their current use, essentially. That can come down to disabled access to the building and things like that. But it's predominantly depots, community facilities such as pavilions, those types of things that we see that are not showing as suitable at the moment. So it could be that accessibility piece, but there's some other drivers in there as well that we see is causing issues. But as I say, we're working through that rationalisation process and looking at whether we keep all of these buildings or not. We have seen increasing demand for financial support over the last year, so crisis grant applications are up and spend has increased. Seen discretionary housing payments spend increase as well. In community care grants, we've seen less applications, but they have a higher value. That really shows wider economic pressures that are being felt across K&M and across Aberdeenshire, and real cost of living impacts coming through there rather than a service performance issue. Where we are seeing increased payments, that is because the value of the goods that are required they're costing more. So ultimately things cost more than they used to. We also see spikes around winter, particularly with assistance for heating, energy related costs. So those types of things we're definitely seeing coming through. And as I say, that the cost of things, be that food, be that goods, either through crisis grants or community care grants, has increased. So that is absolutely being reflected in the spend that we see. I think I will probably leave it there, Chair. As I say, overall performance is good. Demand-led areas, we are seeing increases in terms of costs and in some areas in terms of applications. Buildings definitely work for us to continue to do around that, looking at that asset rationalisation piece and where we do invest the pot of funds that we have to ensure that buildings continue to meet standards across the board. But I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob, for the report and the introduction to it. We have a couple of hands for you at the moment. So that's, first of all, Councillor Sullivan. Mel.
Morning. I was wondering, I should know this after 4 years, but if a building, these 18 buildings that aren't suitable for purpose, are they used for that purpose anyway? Are they vacant, or is it a mix of the two? Thank you.
Through you, Chair, it will be a mixture of the two. Some of them will be vacant buildings that are still held. We haven't declared them surplus at this point. Once we declare them surplus, they come off the list effectively, and we look to do something else with them. But some of them will be vacant. Some of them will still be used because they are still fit to be used. They just may not be accessible in terms of disabled access, things like that. So there may still be a use for that building at this point in time, but we wouldn't necessarily deem it suitable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carr, George.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Rob, for your presentation. Just a question on building suitability versus building maintenance. Are we, in your opinion, sort of maintaining our buildings adequately, which also can impact on suitability? To basic stuff like cleaning gutters and so on, which is a big thing, particularly along the coast, adjacent to the sea. Thanks.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We know we have a repairs backlog. It's some £150 million across our school estates. It is some 20 to 30 million across the wider estate. So we will never get on top of that entirely. There is just not enough funding in the system. But we do what we can and prioritise what we can within the available funding that we have. We are looking to do more of our sort of gutter maintenance and cleaning gutters over the course of this year to ensure that we can get on top of some of that, because that has been one areas that we probably have seen a backlog over recent years. So that's one of the areas that we're prioritising this year, because we know the damage that can cause buildings in terms of water ingress and other issues that arise from that. So those types of what can be seen as smaller maintenance issues, we are looking to try and get on top of as much as we possibly can this year, just to ensure that buildings remain fit for purpose going forward. Thank you.
You want to come back, Councillor Carr?
Yeah, and glad to hear that stitching time work is being done, because as you say, that can often lead to much bigger problems and expensive problems as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Turning to Councillor Turner. Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Rob. I think it's only a bit fair I asked you the same question as I asked Mr. Wood, and that is, you've got data and figures you presented here for K&M. I'm just wondering, comparatively, how do we show versus the other 5 areas? Is there things that we are good at here in K&M, or things that we are bad versus the others? That'd be my first question.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. You'll appreciate a lot of our data within the report is Aberdeenshire-wide data. It is predominantly the building-specific data that is pulled out, and it is I would say, much of a muchness across Aberdeenshire. There is very little between the different areas in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the data. So we are quite similar across the board. Some of that is the way we are set up. We don't certainly don't favour any area over another. We look at prioritisation, but everyone gets a bit of an equal share, I would say, across service provision.
Yeah. When I look at customer services and abandonment rate of calls, I tend to think, how do we know that's K&M? So I guess my question is that the Aberdeenshire figure? You just apportioned it to K&M. So I see you're nodding your head. I'll let you speak.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, it's the Aberdeenshire figure that's in the report in terms of call abandonment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had some questions, but they've been answered, Rob, as we've gone along. So I'm not seeing any further hands, in which case I'll take us to the recommendations for us, which is to acknowledge, consider and comment on progress made in relation to business services performance indicators relating to the Kincardine and Mearns area, and to note that the Director of Business Services will continue to present performance reports to the Area Committee on a 6-monthly basis, in line with the performance management framework, evidencing progress and performance for the delivery of the council plan with an area perspective until the appropriate place plans are in place. So we've discharged that responsibility. Thank you for being with us this morning, Rob, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we'll move back to what was the run of our agenda. So we are going to go back to item 6, which is the Kincardine and Mearns Community Plan for 22 to 25. It's the end of plan summary. We have Community Planning Officer Leslie Robertson with us. Thank you very much for your patience, because you were just about to start when I pulled the rug just then. So I'll hand over to you to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you. So the Kincardine and Mearns Community Plan 2022 to 2025 set out the locally agreed priorities developed through community engagement, data analysis and partnership working. To give a bit of background, the Community Planning Board has asked all areas to align on reporting to area committees at least once a year. And further, the advent of partnership place plans has seemed timely to summarise some of the work which has taken place on the local community plan, which as stated run from 2022 to 2025, but which we did further refresh for 2026. The report's not intended to list everything that's been done over that time period, but to highlight some of the key pieces of work which have taken place. I think it's really important to know that many of these pieces of work have only been possible with the collaboration of partners within the area. It's like to acknowledge their contribution to the outcomes achieved. Note should be made of the partnership between community planning and Kincardine development partnership. There's a service level agreement. KDP sent 20 hours per week on community planning focused projects to support the delivery of local priorities and wider Lloyd's outcomes. This has been hugely beneficial to the community planning landscape within the area. Achievements to highlight and note are many, but include the construction of the community building in Edsel Woods, opened just last weekend, and the advent of social prescribing in Inverberry, which is the first project of its kind in NHS Campion. I think the reason for highlighting these projects is to emphasise that projects are a bit like a steeplechase. They need endurance and they need stamina. Not just from us, but also from the communities and partners who are involved. Obstacles are met frequently along the way, and it takes time to build up the trusted and trusting relationship needed to get to the finish line. These projects mentioned have not been a quick piece of work. The projects that have taken a number of years to get to the point where we are at the moment. I would also note that the final priority with an education and learning theme has been taken forward by our partners within the Kincardine and Mearns Local Learning Partnership. The learning from the project will be shared by the partnership and finalised. So at present, work is ongoing to engage with communities on our partnership place plans. We've carried out engagement with communities in the Mackie and Port Lethen catchment areas. And additionally, work is just starting to look at the data relevant to both areas and also to think about how we take forward a similar process within the Mearns Academy and district catchment areas. I'd welcome any questions or comments on this report. Thank you. Ask you to pop your microphone.
Thank you very much for the introduction to the report, Leslie, and for all the work that is here, the endurance and that engagement with partners that you're speaking on. I will invite any questions or comments. Councillor Alison.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leslie, for presenting this report. And it's clear there's really strong highlights from K&M within this, illustrating that partnership work, that resilient partnership work as well in a local area, and really with that place-based focus as well. So it's really key to see these fantastic achievements within it. And obviously thanks to everyone involved, as well as yourselves and the team. The Edsel Woods Community Hub was obviously highlighted at the weekend that several of us attended as well. So thanks for that in particular. I would just say, though, that going forward, I think it's important, as you know, I'm going to say this because I've said it at community planning meetings as well, that we have a sense on what the data is telling us about the overall needs across the area, and that we work in terms of the local outcome improvement plans that are set for us by the community planning partnership across Aberdeenshire as well, and so that we can actually see the progress being made to meet these identified needs across the piece. So huge examples of great achievements, wonderful place planning here as well. Just a plea, please, that as we move forward, we tie our objectives and our activities far more closely to those recognised and data-based priorities, both locally and across Aberdeenshire. Thank you.
Okay. You want to pass on, Ms. Wilson?
Yes, please. So community planning officers as a group are at present working with the team who are developing the data hub. Because as it stands at the moment, it doesn't always give us the right data or in the right format that we want. So that's a bit of work that's been acknowledged, and we're working to improve that. And in terms of the links with the LOIP, as the place LOIP develops, we'll certainly be ensuring that everything that we do is relevant to that and to the other LOIP as well. So it is something that's on our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carr, George.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Leslie, for your report. As you well know, living in a rural community, Kincardine Mearns rural transport is a really challenging issue, and certainly it's one that has dogged me since I was elected, and we've actually only seen public transport go down as opposed to go the other way. And I know you've been doing a fair bit of work to try and look at how we can maybe tackle some of this. I didn't see in the report anything that was really, revolutionary. We were really going to be able to move this forward. I think Transport Action, Kincardine, the track group, they did a fair bit of analysis of this, and a massive legislation barrier to new operators coming in. But is there anything that you saw that we could maybe work up, further in conjunction with all other agencies to see if we can tackle this, because we've got huge inequalities across rural Aberdeenshire at the moment, particularly for young people who may have access to free public transport, but the only people who seem to benefit from it are those who've got multiple options of public transport, whereas our residents have got next to none. So just a wee comment on that would be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, so the local community planning group have funded through the Rural Poverty Scheme a report to be commissioned on rural transport. That is at this moment in its finalised draft state, and it's going to be presented at the next joint meeting that we have, to which all members will be invited, and that's going to be after the recess. Can't quite remember the date it is now. So watch the space. There has been some really useful bits of work have come out of that. We've obviously got to ensure that what we are doing within the area fits within what is being done Aberdeenshire wide. So we're doing a bit of work to ensure that is the case. But one bit of work which is happening at the moment is that the young people within Mearns Academy are looking at how they can have some influence on rural transport within their own setting. And I'm just away to speak to Mary Miller. In the next couple of weeks, I contacted her to ensure that they had our support in the work that we were doing ongoing. So we're going to have a chat about that, and that will also be brought to the joint meeting after the recess. So yeah, it's the one area, you know, we don't have an awful lot in terms of data. We don't have an awful lot of areas that we perform the work within Scotland. Rural accessibility within the coastal strip is one of those. So yeah, it's right that it's highlighted and we're doing some work on that. So you don't want to prejudge how that's going to develop at the moment, but certainly will help.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carr. Just a couple of questions from me. So one relates to again, and climate awareness and adaptation survey that was done as part of your priority around the natural environment and sustainability and so on. So I just wondered how many people have taken part in that, if that's information that you've had, whether it was well engaged with, and yeah, wondering how that work is progressing. Thank you.
Yeah, so the project, the survey ran from September 2024 to the end of October 2024, and in that time we had 44 completed surveys, which was about 25% of those who actually went on and looked at it. So not the turnaround rate that we'd hoped for. Of those surveys, one of the questions that we asked was, would the people completing be happy to, if we got in touch with them to discuss further? And we had 12 people who had said yes, they would. And they were all contacted by our partner in NESCAN to do some follow-up. Sadly, since then, the partner within NESCAN has left post, and we don't have a designated resource for K&M within that group at the moment. So I think the work that's going on from that's taken perhaps a slightly different direction that we hoped it would initially. And the most recent work that's coming from that is that working with Amy Newman on resilience, and in particular, I, on a personal level, are helping her with looking at resilience for the disabled community and how we address some of the issues that they face in climate challenging times. So that's where we are at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And that's interesting because obviously it's one of the priorities, and you know, it'd be great to see more participation in and around that. So I guess I would just highlight my own interest in hearing more in due course about how that's developing, because I do think it's an important strand of work for all our communities and how we're adapting to the changing environment that we're in. So that was one question. The other one, I did mention to you prior to committee, which, because I think it's important that we understand. So we have a report before us that says, you know, this is what was achieved and this is what we expect next. And we have that for all of those 6 areas except the K&M local learning partnership. So if you could just explain why that is, why there isn't the same amount of detail in that. And the link at the time, certainly there was a link to a private website that we can go any further with.
Yeah, the local education and learning did come as a priority within K&M. But within Aberdeenshire Council, we have local learning partnerships on per administrative area, and that is really their bread and butter of what they do. They are the experts in education and learning. We have a partner from education and learning sitting within the local community planning group. I also sit within the local learning partnership. So on discussion, we felt they were the best vehicle to take that community forward, which I think is common for what they've done throughout the rest of Ireland this year. The reason we haven't got any of the learning outcomes as yet is that they weren't asked to give a good report on what we're doing at the moment. So that will be shared when we get information from them.
Again, I think that's important for us to be able to scrutinise or monitor that and see where things are going. So look forward to more information on that in due course. Keep my own hand down. Are there any further questions? Seeing no hands. So in which case I'll take us to the recommendations, which were to note the progress being made in delivering the Kincardine and Mearns community plan for 2022 to 25. And to acknowledge the contribution of community groups, partner organisations and the Kincardineshire Development Partnership in supporting delivery. And on behalf of the committee, we would like to do that. So please do pass on our thanks for the work that's been done together on this agenda. So thank you very much for being with us, Leslie, this morning. We'll move on now to item 7, which is the Kincardine and Mearns Landscape Services Works Programme for 26-27. And we have Ken Regan with us this morning to introduce the report. Welcome, Ken. I will pass over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning or good afternoon now to yourself and members. I'm pleased to be here this morning, or this afternoon rather, to seek approval for Landscape Services Work Programme for 26-27 for the Kincardine and Mearns area. Following the budget setting at full council on the 27th of February, Landscape have developed the proposals outlined in Appendix 1. Whilst available resources for 26-27 prove a more challenging environment for delivery of some maintenance activities than in previous years, the service is continuing to consider opportunities to assist and work with local community groups in the delivery of some works where those groups have the capacity to do so, and as a service we continue to work within our resources we have. The report sets out a range of work and activities for the coming year, many of which will reflect ongoing engagement with local members, communities and stakeholders. The plan provides a balance between the needs of users who have a variety of interests in their local parks and open spaces, including the enhancement and improvement of areas for biodiversity and the opportunities that exist to protect and maximise the public pound. As members will know, Aberdeenshire Council's Pollinator Action Plan aims for at least 10% of public green space to be enhanced and managed for pollinators. Work is ongoing through our green space officers to not only confidently demonstrate that the target has been reached, but to advise members when the calculation has been achieved. A likelihood exists that we will exceed this target. In addition to the Council's work programme, the Council has also been allocated the last year of the Scottish Government Play Renewal Improvement funding for play parks. Members should note that although Kincardine and Mearns records the lowest budget in the 6 areas for non-routine burial programme, the majority of this budget relates to the interment of caskets and coffins. As such, it reflects a lower overall number of burials in Kincardine and Mearns compared to other areas. Appendix 2 shows a comparison of spend across the 6 areas for the current year. And I'm happy to take any questions members have, and thank you again for inviting me to this presentation.
Thank you very much, Ken, for your introduction to the report. I will just, as we begin, to take questions and comments. I just want to remind us of the recommendations that are before us this morning. So we're going to be asked to approve the proposals for allocating revenue budget as detailed in Appendix 1 within the K&M area for landscape services and bereavement services. This is very similar to what we did with the roads and infrastructure work programme recently. So we're looking at the revenue budget there, and then we will be making a comment to our infrastructure services committee on the proposals in Appendix 1 for capital funding within the Kincardine and Mearns area for cemeteries. So with that in mind, I will ask Councillor Carr. George. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, and thanks, Ken, for your report. I think first and foremost, I think congratulations to the team in Kincardine and Mearns. Right, good reports from the communities, community councils, in terms of the teams that go out, they engage with the community council and residents who are trying to make a difference to their own community. There's nothing but good reports coming back. So I'd just like to put that forward and to say a big thank you for that approach, which is above and beyond the call of duty and appreciated. And I think that's even more significant when you rightly say we've got one of the smaller budgets, for Kincardine Mearns is to Aberdeenshire. There's 2 points that have been raised. First of all, I know, after storm, we normally have to, or your team normally go out and clean up afterwards. But there was a concern from Inverbervie that after the storm damage there and the shingle that was washed up, it wasn't moved very quickly, and the reference, Haven, which sort of a much faster response. And so you'd maybe like to comment on that. Another point was just on weed killing. I know we've got a line for invasive species, but I think for those of us that are involved in budgeting and so on, further down the line, we'd like to have a greater breakdown as to the weed killing budget, because this is something that's becoming more and more noticeable across Aberdeenshire, and we want to be able to address this if we can. So just a wee point on a line for weed killing in the future, so we can analyse where that lies within the overall plan. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chair. The removal of material from beach from following storms is obviously it's an issue which affects us every year. We try and not only will we remove material from our own sites, but we'll assist other services where it's their asset. And I think in Inverbervie there is a little bit of confusion as to whether the car park is a roads asset or a landscape asset. We've often, we don't have car parks, we don't have many car parks, but roads maintain that it's not theirs. But wherever we can and we've got the resources, we will deploy them to remove material following storm damage. But depending on when that arrives and what other priority tasks we've got on, that can be delayed. But we will attend to it as quickly as we possibly can. As regards for the weeds, and so there are 2 issues there, Chair. There's invasive non-native species, which we have a budget for and we will treat. So that's predominantly things like Japanese knotweed, giant hogweed, Himalayan balsam, and we have a budget for that to try and stem and prevent that from spreading on council-owned land. The other budget which we maintain on behalf of Roads colleagues is the street spraying budget. However, as anybody who's received an email from me in recent months, that budget isn't sufficient to treat all streets in all settlements. So we've prioritised a series of streets, predominantly in the academy towns, in the what would be classed as according to the place plan, the settlement centres, those areas with the highest footfall. We've prioritised those sites to be treated. Along with those, any major transport hub from the bus or train station into the settlement centre, they'll be treated, as well as any major tourist attraction, and again the routes into a settlement centre. Those smaller communities which don't have any of those will treat the main route or routes through those villages. But other than that, we don't have the budget to spray anything out with that. So I hope that answers your question, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, obviously it's something we'll have to revisit, but it's good to get some figures for these things so we can analyse where we are with budgets going forward. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smith, and has it come down or you planned to?
No, I was going to come in about the heavily involved from the knotweed because it is really all up and down the verde everywhere, but I realise it's sort of been answered. It's council on the land that's been prioritised, and we've got no budget for anything else, but it is spreading, rapidly up and down the verde.
Chair, Chair, we'll treat, so the money we've got in the budget there is for treating invasive non-native species on council land. Colleagues in the environmental planning team have in the past trained volunteers up who can, with the owner's permission, go onto private land and treat this same species of invasive weeds on private land. But this money in our budget is predominantly for the treatment of invasive non-natives on council-owned land.
Can I just clarify on this point? I mean, the thing to do would be to report on our website.
Yes.
The site's not correct, and then it would follow through.
That's correct, yeah.
Next steps would be to identify people.
There's a few ways it can be reported. I think CC, Scottish Invasive Species Initiative, or NESBREC, the websites there, or the council's own website, they can be reported, and that will filter through to the relevant officer, who will then either pass it on to ourselves if it's on council land, or volunteers in that local community area.
There is action that can follow if it's reported. So Councillor Turner, Alan.
Yeah, I guess first of all, I'll pick up on something Councillor Carr introduced in terms of the work that you do post storms and cleaning up. So I certainly appreciate the way you work with the roads teams in order to actually clean up their say Stonehaven beachfront, etc. So I do appreciate that, and I certainly get feedback from multiple residents in that area. Again, appreciate of the services and the response, etc. your teams actually put out. I had a question in relation to what is it, Appendix 2, Ken. You said, and it's the burial grounds, and you said proportionately there's less, if I heard you right, there's less burials in K&M than what there is elsewhere in the Shire. So I guess my question is what's driving the number? Is it the number of burials in terms of why it's, I'll take an example, Banff Buchan is just approximately twice as much as what the budget allocation is. If it's burials that's driving it, don't we actually charge for grave digging, etc., as part of the service?
We do, yes, Chair. We do charge for our services. We've got to be cost neutral, and so the bulk of, I think, the current landscape manager would like to split the burials and take it out of non-routine budgets going forward. But yeah, we as a service, we need to be cost neutral, and I think that hasn't been the position in previous years. So we've in effect been subsidising burials.
Okay, I'll leave it at that for just now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just a few comments from me. Well, first of all, I think to reiterate what Councillor Carr said in terms of thanks to the service for the work that they do. Certainly, in my experience, very responsible whatever they can be within budget to do as much as they can do in a quick and timely manner. I think the other thing that you highlighted in your introduction is the degree to which community groups are contributing to what is happening around our towns, whether that's through floral displays, stepping up and helping with weeding outside that main area, perhaps that you can address, and in lots of other ways, maintaining planters and making a difference to our communities. And I think I would certainly want to put on record my recognition of that for my own community, the groups that are doing that. There's many individuals who do that on, quietly up their own street, and all the other, within, whether it's Stonehaven, Burley, Mearns, Kirk, to acknowledge the work that our communities are doing to support our towns to be
as good as they possibly can do, and recognising the challenges that you're facing. You can only spend what you have to spend, Ken, and I know that, and you'll do the best that you can with it. I guess we've already touched on this third page where we see the comparative costs. If we move away from the burial grounds one to the parks line, do those numbers just simply reflect a different amount of land that needs to be maintained? What is driving ultimately the numbers against the different areas?
So, Chair, the calculation for non-routine. So we have two budgets, as you know. The routine budget is calculated by the sort of physical assets that we own. So the number of parks in a particular settlement, the linearage of grass or shrubs or whatever features that we maintain, that sets the essential routine maintenance. The non-routine budget is set over the average of a 5-year period of spend in that area. And members will know that for the last 2 years we've been on an essential spend only instruction from senior managers and the chief exec. So that's how that figure is calculated.
Thank you for clarifying that. I just think it's important that when we have numbers that compare things, that we know if we're dealing with apples and oranges, or whether, what are the baselines, so that we can understand and interpret what's before us. So appreciate that clarification there. I'll leave it at that, other than to say I do support, in terms of comments for Infrastructure Services Committee, I will be supporting the notion of extending the burial ground and the investment that's required there in terms of capital here in Stonehaven. So if I could bring in Councillor Carney, Laurie. Apologies.
So it's just really Wendy's hands not working.
Oh, so apologies, Wendy. Please come in.
Yes, good afternoon. I keep two areas, middle well, refurbishment of massive burn, catchment area. What does that mean?
Sorry, Chair, I missed that. Could you repeat that, please?
It says refurbishment of catchment area of massive burn. I just wondered what that meant.
Okay. I've got Neil West, who's with us, calling in. Neil, if you're able to comment on that, please.
It's all right, yes. There's the big wooden plank logs, Councillor Agnew, that's across the bottom of the footpath sort of thing. It's just to save when the burn goes over, it saves the debris and that washing all down the park. So it was just to renew that. It's looking tired and it's not doing its job so effectively as it was. So it was just to renew that.
Yeah, just I remember, Jason wouldn't boiler maybe. There was Ian and Albert and me, and we were going to put rills there. And the idea was there'd be a bigger basin behind. I see you have mind a bit, and it's better for the dogs actually. And then the rills would help slow it down a bit. And I just wondered if that was any option for that, because the idea was if it's a Japanese garden that needs water and a wee bit wider, would make it look more, pleasant. And I just wonder if that was in the cards or not.
There was work carried out there a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
but it's quite expensive to carry out all that sort of work, so it's not an
So
option just now.
If I managed to give you a donation, would you do it?
That's an off-table conversation.
You never know what I can get. I might come back to you on that. The other thing was where maintenance of planted biodiversity areas. Again, the mineral well, there's a bit there, it says butterfly path, and it's just a mess. There's a lot of dockings, and I didn't see many. I saw one type of flower, which meant to me it would only attract maybe one butterfly. And this wonder, a lot of people moan about it, say it looks untidy. That's why I'm asking.
Chair, what I'd come back to Councillor on that is that we are on a learning curve when it comes to biodiversity, and we are trying to encourage teams to take ownership of these areas and act proactively to try and control things like dockens and thistles and those invasive species which might take over a site. I've got a small wildflower area out at the front of my house, and I've noticed over the last 3 years since I've been growing it, how you get a different range of species every year as it progresses. So the first year I had very little growing in there, with the exception of a few daisies and some clover. Last year, the clover took over, and it was a huge display of clover. This year, it's oxeye daisy. So there's a progression. So I think we do need to be a little bit patient, and we can't expect anything, particularly with perennial herbaceous rather than annuals. So annuals, I don't mean to teach grannies to suck eggs, but as you'll know that annuals will grow and flower in 1 year. Perennials will come year after year, but then perhaps not as attractive orally. But one of the criticisms we often get from ecologists is that sometimes those messy areas, those areas which aren't perhaps as aesthetically pleasing as we as humans see, are more valuable to insects for laying eggs and for things to pupate and overwinter. So we perhaps sometimes, and you listen to experts, they'll advise not to be too tidy, to be too hung up on being tidy, because as I say, those messy areas are those areas where it's all well and good having flowers which insects can feed upon, but you need those areas that they're going to then lay their eggs for the caterpillars to grow and what have you.
We never thought of putting some, like the butterfly bush, for instance, and attract more butterflies. I've forgotten its right name.
But Buddleia.
I said Buddleia.
Well, there are ecologists who believe that Buddleia is quite an invasive species and can quite easily, as anybody knows, if you see a building site which has been left for a period of time, Buddleia is one of those pioneer species which takes over. So it can be a bit of a bully and outcompete lots of other things, but it is beautiful and it smells great and it's very popular with certain types of butterflies.
I don't want to add to your problems, honestly. No, I can understand that. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Agnew. I'm seeing no further hands, so I will take us back to the recommendations before us this morning. We are being asked to approve the proposals for allocating revenue budgets detailed in Appendix 1 within the Kincardine Mearns area for landscape services and marine services. Do we approve? Yes, agreed. Thank you. And in terms of making comment to Infrastructure Services Committee on the proposals in Appendix 1 for capital funding within the KNM area for cemeteries, are we content with what's proposed there? There's been no comments about Petteresso cemetery extension. I've indicated that I think that's necessary and welcome. I've not heard anything to the contrary. So we'll take that as being the feedback, is that would be welcome. Thank you. Okay, on that basis, can I thank you very much, Ken, for being with us this morning, introducing the report and answering our questions, and Neil for being available to answer further specific questions locally. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Chair. Bye now. Bye.
Okay, that jumped through the agenda earlier. I can now say that the public section of the meeting has concluded, that the recording will stop. Thank you for your interest in our meeting. Members of the committee will now go on to consider confidential business without the press or public presence. So thank you very much for your time this morning.